Hello, welcome everybody. Come in, sit down. There's plenty of room down the front. There's a room at the back as well. You can basically sit wherever you want. That's the way we roll. Welcome to everybody to this panel where we're going to be discussing perhaps one of the most interesting areas of technology at the moment, given the situation that we find ourselves in with the COVID-19 lockdown, and that is health tech. The pandemic lockdown has dramatically changed the way that we look at health, not only because we are all so much more aware of the steps we can personally take to protect ourselves, but also in the technology we're willing to integrate into our lives now that face-to-face appointments are not the healthiest option. So what will the experience that we have today mean to the ongoing evolution of the health tech sector? That's the question we're going to be covering. We've got some brilliant experts for you. This is your session though, everybody. So I welcome questions, comments, thoughts, ideas, contributions. I will be keeping an eye on the chat room as we go along. So please do keep your thoughts coming in. If you specifically want me to ask a question, then maybe look over on the Q&A and post it there. Otherwise, I'll just react to things as they come along. But the first job on my to-do list, is to introduce to you our crack team of experts that we have assembled to discuss all things health tech. We have got Hanine Estephan, Tom Evans, Harjeet Singh Rekhi, Dominic O'Regan, and Anna Gudmundson. Thank you so much for joining me, panelists. I would like you each first, before we kick off the discussion, to just quickly introduce yourself, who you work for, and frame your experience within the context of this discussion. And since I am a creature of habit and I'm looking at the screen, and Harjeet, you are top left of my screen, I'm gonna pick on you first. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Hannah. Thank you for the opportunity to be participating in this panel today. By way of introduction, I'm the GM for Digital Cities within Dell Technologies based out of Singapore. In this capacity, I lead Dell Technologies' global go-to-market initiatives, engaging with customers, partners, as well as ISVs and system integrators. As you probably know, Dell Technologies provides customers, across the globe with cutting-edge solutions. My role is really to provide thought leadership and executive momentum to the initiatives, working with our teams globally. So I help integrate go-to-market strategies across all our businesses and match them to customer needs. I frequently engage with customers on artificial intelligence, deep learning, blockchain, security, and multi-cloud. So that's me, and look forward to the robust discussion today.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Dr. Hanine, please introduce yourself.
Yes, so I'm Hanine. I'm an epidemiologist by background and a global health tech executive and advisor. I will discuss today my experience with two startups based out of the UK that I've been closely working with, Zava and Mindberry. So Zava is a pan-European online primary care provider and online pharmacy operating across 4 European countries since 2011, both in the B2B as well as the B2B2C and B2C space. They offer online medical consultation and as well as online medication delivery of medications and diagnostics, while Mindberry is an early stage digital mental health platform providing coaching, counseling for a wide range of mental health conditions, as well operating in the B2B as well as the B2C space through communication happens through audio, video, and messaging.
Perfect.
And looking forward to speaking with you today.
Likewise, thank you so much. Dominic.
Yeah, thank you, Kate. So I've worked in biotechnology pharmaceuticals for about 25, 30 years on the commercial side, marketing, business insights, sort of market access, both strategic planning and tactical work in a whole range of indications. For the last 4 years, I've also done some seed-stage angel investing. So these are therapeutic companies, biotech, diagnostics, and medtech, so both digital and non-digital, and work with some of those early-stage companies to help them get partnerships, help them get additional investment in, and help them really their business planning and help them develop, which I also do on a consultancy basis as well. So I have sort of cut across, the classic drugs, biotech, in addition to sort of medtech and digital health.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Tom.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tom. I guess I'm a creative entrepreneur, and I wear a few different hats, run a few different businesses. Today, I'm wearing a hat that says Bleep Bleeps on it, and Bleep Bleeps is a consumer electronics tech brand for parents that I've been running for about 5 or 6 years in the medtech space.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And finally, Anna.
Yeah, hi. So my background is a solid background in the tech industry, large and small companies. I worked a fair amount in the sort of health and tech, well-being tech area. Had lots of different roles, including coding to turnaround CEO, and I'm now co-founder and CEO at Bioself Technology. And we're on a mission to help people deal with anxiety and be more resilient to stress. So we're using cutting-edge science and technology, and we combine that with wisdom and old traditions, proven practices to have both an immediate effect on people using our products, but also to really help try to move the needle on mental health, the mental health and stress crisis, I guess. So our product Sensate is a vagus nerve toning system innovated by my co-founder, Stefan Smelik. And that can help people improve a quite wide range of stress-related conditions, and that includes anxiety, insomnia, migraines, inflammation, and so on. And I think that with the current situation, the huge amount of stress, isolation, anxiety, the timing of actually being able to get the Sensate to the market couldn't be better.
Yes, I mean, I was reading an article. I can't remember the exact figures, but there's a massive increase in the uptake of mental health apps and things like mindfulness meditation and stuff like that. And I've personally experienced the impact of the pandemic because I've had a shoulder problem. Those of you who follow me on Twitter will know this. And I've had to take medical advice over it, which has been a series of kind of communications through video and phone initially. It did extend my diagnosis process a little bit, but it seemed a far more efficient way to operate. And given the strain that the health system has been under up until now, even before the pandemic. So, Tom, I want to come to you first. What impact has the pandemic had on your business?
Yeah, well, it actually hasn't had that much impact on the way that we work. We're a micro company. We've been working virtually and remotely for about 8 years. So actually, it's quite interesting to see the whole world's kind of catching up with the way that we work. We've got people in Hong Kong and people all around the UK and all over the shop, and we've been using Slack and video chat for as long as we can remember. So it's nice. It's nice to see them finally woken up to this sort of, I guess, different way of working. Everyone's getting Zoom for these video calls, but apart from that, that's kind of cool. E-commerce is up. People are buying a lot more online these days. I think there's some investment challenges, particularly in the hardware scene. It was always a challenging space for investment anyway. MedTech, I'd imagine, is probably flourishing now, particularly if you've got some kind of COVID-19 related product. And actually, the pandemic actually caused us to pivot slightly our roadmap. So actually, somebody tweeted us and noticed that we were making a contactless thermometer, and that product was in development, and we accelerated the development of that product to bring it out sooner and did a crowdfunding campaign and actually tweaked the functionality so that it had open data, so it could openly track temperature data and hopefully stop the spread of pandemics maybe quicker than before.
Right.
So, yeah.
There's all these ingenious, sort of ideas that have been accelerated through this. By the way, if you're wondering who was speaking then, Tom is the one below me who's a freeze frame at the moment. Tom, is there any teenagers that you need to go and shout at to stop playing Fortnite on the Xbox or something? Maybe go and do that while I move over. Your camera is completely still, but we can hear you fine. Hannah, okay, same question to you. The pandemic and your business, what are the impacts?
Was that Anna?
Yes, Anna, sorry.
Yeah. So I think the pandemic has really elevated the industry. As you said, there has been a massive increase in uptake on well-being and mental health technology, but also just like there's been 1,000% increase in text to like federal mental health hotlines and those kind of things. So it's just become very acute. There's an acute awareness now of mental well-being, which I think is really important. And I think there's no way back. Now we have to do something, and this awareness is both on a lot of individual levels, but also on a societal level. And but we were in the middle of a fundraise, and so effects in the pandemic, seed funding is down, I think 80-90%. And we still managed to raise money during this, an awesome California-based VC called 10-1-10. So we're now 65% through our fundraise, but it's tough. And crowdfunding is also really squeezed. I'm glad to hear, Tom, that your Kickstarter campaign is doing well. We have an Indiegogo rewards-based campaign going, and I think just because of the demand of our type of product, that's doing really well. But in general, fundraising for early stage right now is just really tough. We also sort of primarily remote team and a global team and have that kind of setup. But I think for us, it also presented an opportunity to just build a culture and processes in a healthy way from the ground up. And that became quite important because you need to take like extreme personal responsibility for your well-being to work in this way. But I would say that the most important impact of the pandemic is that the mental health crisis is no longer disputed. And so before COVID, Americans are always much better at the statistics, but so like 1 in 5 Americans were struggling with mental health. And during COVID, that shifted to 1 to 3 that are potentially clinically depressed. So, and that's going to increase. So that I think is the biggest impact in general.
Yes, it's a really good point. The one thing as well that the crisis right now has really shone a spotlight on, I think, is the huge talent that we have in this sector. And I want to turn to our serial entrepreneurs now. Hanine, I'm going to start with you. In the health tech sector, do you believe this is an opportunity and a time to really consider getting into health tech? Because it seems like the obvious market's going to expand, and health tech has been slow to sort of make that digital transformation move prior to the situation. Hanine, what do you think?
Yes. So I would like to say yes, but before I go deeper into this question and answer it, I would like to highlight that health tech is a broad field, and you can have digital solution along the healthcare value chain, from prevention to post-acute care to remote monitoring solution. So all of these could involve some sort of a health tech solution. So I believe COVID unfolded on the existing challenges within the healthcare system in general. So now not only people who are interested in healthcare or healthcare workers know about these challenges, it's opened it up to the world. Similar to what Anna was saying, there's more awareness about the struggles and the challenges and the weakness in these healthcare system. So I definitely think that's a good thing. And I will focus a bit about my experience on the service delivery side of health tech, so the telehealth. And I feel there has been good favorable factors for setting up a business during this time, and this is an increase in the adoption rate for digital care. So now we see that, before COVID, it was about 1% of medical consultation were happening online, and we expect it to rise to more than 20%. So the uptick and the growth is massive. And this is due to behavioral change as well to the awareness about digital health in general and telehealth specifically. The second element is the relaxation of governmental regulations across the globe. And from my experience in Europe, we've seen relaxation in France, in the UK. So for instance, in France now the governmental regulation are opening it up. For instance, people or healthcare workers or physicians can use all sorts of channels to do consultations online. So even WhatsApp and Skype, and they opened it up for renewing of repeat prescription for chronic conditions. So a lot of things has been relaxed in relation to regulations. And I would say the third point, which is unfortunately, because of the situation, we have seen a lot of talent as well. So that has been kind of available, and this is good because now you get the opportunity to start your own thing, and you would have plenty of good talent out there ready to work. And funding, it's an interesting one in terms of investment and funding, because at one point, it's a struggle, but at another point, you see that there are still VCs and PE funds interested to fund, healthcare, and especially digital health, basically solutions and startups. So we've seen a deal, like a big one, Teladoc and InTouch, who just acquired basically InTouch for $6 billion in the US just during COVID. So there's more awareness. Let's Get Checked. They've raised about 50 million, and congratulations, Anna, for raising as well some money. So it's positive, and also I think it's tough, so it's in between. Mm-hmm. But definitely by the time you set up and you're ready for seed funding, I think the economy will be ready for it. So
yes. So perfect. I'd be interested to hear from you guys watching. Have any of you had any interactions with your healthcare providers during the pandemic, like myself? What's been your experience? Feel free to add your voice to, your text to the discussion. Harjeet, what do you think then? Do you think it's a good time to look at setting up in business in this sector?
Absolutely, Kate. I think, what some of the conversations we've had with our community, our fraternity, as well as our customers and partners, all businesses are now can be considered a healthcare business. Businesses are really looking at how they can make the environment that they operate in safe for their employees, for their partners, for their visitors, and for their vendors. And so at Dell Technologies, for instance, we're hunkered down. We're supporting our customers. We're making sure that our customers, are given the remote working solutions like business PCs, some of our Workspace ONE solutions, our monitors, and other peripherals that customers need. We're also using our supply chain to fulfill orders as quickly as possible. So there is tremendous demand if you have a good solution for customers that are looking at continuing their business continuity plans during this period. And clearly there are logistical strategies that one needs to employ, to meet with customer demands at this point in time. And in these fluid times, it's clear each day is different, right? Our customers, partners, teams are all balancing the many dynamics of the new normal. So it's clearly important that, there is tremendous interest and demand from customers. It really is for individual startups to be able to meet that demand, be it in the area of providing a safe working environment for employees and visitors, but also being able to provide the technology solutions for business continuity purposes. I would say definitely.
Dominic, I think until I started planning this discussion with you guys, I wasn't really aware of the difference, or that there is such a difference between health tech, meditech, farm tech. Can you sort of describe those differences and put that into place for our audience? And also, what's the hardest area to break into if you are thinking about setting up in the industry?
Yeah. So in terms of my investments, and I've also got listed companies as well, sort of early stage, post IPO, but really sort of pharma tech and biotech and pharma sometimes use a little bit interchangeably. That we're talking about sort of classic therapeutics, classic drugs across a range of diseases, and also includes things like diagnostics or some diagnostics. MedTech, I would say, or medical device, is really around things like It could be a diagnostic device. It could be a tool a surgeon uses, and the actual hardware that's used in hospital and clinics. Most of, I think, the context of our conversation today, and most of today's thing is around what I call the med tech, which is more the digital health. So that's how I'd sort of split the three out. My background is sort of classic biotech pharma, sort of basic drugs, and I think in terms of the earlier conversation, COVID has had a different effect on each of those. The digital based companies have found it easier because people can communicate, whereas if you actually have to go into a laboratory to do your research or have to have a clinical trial, that needs face-to-face interaction. So it has had a different effect. So.
It's such an interesting and ever-shifting world that we seem to live in at the moment. I want to talk about opportunities with you, Tom. Where do you think are the major opportunities for the health tech business going into the future?
I'm not sure, but I think, an observation would be, like you, I've had some interactions with sort of digital health providers during the pandemic, and actually had some before lockdown too, because my healthcare provider offers this sort of video GP service, which is kind of weird, a bit like Zoom fatigue. It's sort of, it does the job, but like it's not really the same as seeing somebody else or seeing another human. And it's fine if you just want something fixed, but back to the whole mental health thing, I think a lot of the sort of GP appointments are about community and connecting people and time, proper FaceTime with another human. And so I think the opportunity is to be able to obviously connect people, but do it in a human way, that where the technology can kind of disappear. And at the moment, that hasn't really happened for me yet. Perhaps AR, VR, I don't know, smell-o-vision, whatever it is, will maybe help us.
Let's not use the phrase smell-o-vision in connection with health tech. Yeah.
Well, that's a very important sense, Kate, and I'm fighting the corner for smell.
But Tom, it's weird that you say that, because one of the things that has always struck me about technology and the digital world is this idea of social media, social connection, social apps is such a huge part of technology. Is there not a role that kind of technology can play in keeping the social aspect, but giving us that technology platform?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've been a bit of a quantified self freak for many years, and obsessively measure really boring things about, sleep and heart rate and all that kind of stuff. And I'm a big cyclist, and Strava is a big social network for cyclists. And it feels like people connect in the sort of, the bigger cloud of health around specific pastimes and hobbies and activities. But perhaps they don't connect, when they've got a poorly shoulder or whatever it is. I'm sure some things are much more embarrassing than a shoulder. But I think it's a real challenge to get people to share, because quite often, if you were talking to a friend or something, you'd probably get an opinion, and particularly when it's sort of lifestyle related medical stuff. There's a lot that can be done there, I think, with social media. Yeah, perhaps less with people dishing out medicine, I'm sure, but talking, I think, is good.
Yeah, Anna, obviously, when it comes to mental health, one of the things that's been stand out for me is how the digital channels that we allow people to use to seek assistance in that realm make it easier, because you've got that cloak of anonymity. You don't have to walk into a doctor's, stand face to face with them and say, I'm having mental health issues. It's easier to do that when you're not looking at somebody. Do you think that's we're going to continue seeing that being a real benefit for the well-being sector?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are a number of things that the pandemic has just accelerated. So people who previously were resistant to contacting anyone, including doctors via telemedicine, have had a need to, have had to get over that. So So I definitely don't think that the same thing there. Once you've learned how to do that, I don't think there's a way, and it's convenience as well. But there are a number of, and that is directly related to contacting the health care system. But then there is obviously also an increase in just the well-being and preventative care as well, where, you know, we have that sector that is growing enormously as well. I think the importance there is that there is integration. So what I've seen, it's NHS has got, for example, the preventative care program. It's focused primarily on 3 things, and that's smoking, alcohol, and type 2 diabetes or obesity. So the program is not looking very much at mental health issues, and we have to realize the havoc that stress and anxiety is causing in our physical bodies. And so stress and anxiety may well be the reason to smoking, over drinking, or type 2 diabetes, overeating, right? So if we don't integrate and think of mental health and stress and anxiety management as part of the healthcare system, I think it's going to collapse.
It's just the same kind of principle of treating the symptom and not the cause, right?
Yeah.
It seems really obvious, and I do wonder, because I did a piece for BBC Click looking at mental health apps and resources during the pandemic, and one of the things that I tried was mindfulness, and I'd always been a kind of like mindfulness, whatever, you know, and what happened was it had a really profound effect on me, and I would never have tried it had I not been sort of sitting there thinking, oh gosh, you know, what am I going to do? And when I mentioned this on Twitter, loads of people said the same, that and I wonder if it's a question of people have actually had the time to sit down and think about these things as well. I mean, Harjeet, you're nodding along, and I also wanted to come to you, you know, about the opportunities for the health tech in the business of the future. So, do you agree with me? Do you think it's just a question of perhaps a lot of people haven't really taken the time to think about how technology can help them in their health?
Yeah, no, absolutely, Kate. I think, you know, technology is really the final frontier, so to speak, you know, for folks of us, like us, who've spent a majority of our life in technology. I think it truly is the only connection that most people had over the last several months, you know, hunkered down, locked into their places of residence. That's the only way that they've stayed in touch. And that's given them a sense of comfort, knowing that they can reach out to friends and loved ones across the globe. And I think technology plays a really, really important role. But increasingly, businesses and you know, organizations across the globe are going to be spending an enormous amount of time on the safety and well-being of their employees. I think we will begin to see a serious emergence of, you know, something like a chief safety officer along the lines of a chief financial officer or a chief, information officer in most organizations. And clearly that is extending your point about, you know, well-being of employees and visitors and vendors and partners in an organization. And so this chief safety officer in a corporate context is really going to be the person who's going to be providing for the well-being of the employees. And it's not just about, you know, the physical safety of human beings, but it's also the mental well-being and the social connect and the kind of emotional connect that most human beings need in a work and in a personal environment. And so we're going to see a lot of changes in the way organizations look at these things. That's just my opinion. I believe that there's going to be a lot of emphasis around well-being of employees, wherever they are. And this has really shown the vulnerability of most of us who happen to go to office, travel, meet with people as a form of release. And not being able to do that really makes you wonder, whether you're being valuable, whether you're being able to contribute, whether you really are as valuable to the organization as you probably thought. So clearly, there's going to be a lot of investment in that area.
Talking of investment, let's talk now about trends. Obviously, we have some great talent here in terms of being able to pinpoint some of those trends for us. Hanine, I'm going to come to you first. You've got your finger in so many different sort of areas of the business. What do you think are going to be the emerging trends that will be really important in the months ahead?
So definitely like something around health and safety for the workers. I completely agree with Harjeet on this point. There will definitely be an increase across the whole value chain into more adoption of digital solutions, from prevention to remote care, such as the ones that I've mentioned before, along the different type of conditions. Basically more chronic as well as non-chronic conditions. And I think there will be also higher growing demand for femtech. So I would envision this to be across, different, mostly the wearables. I think that this would be something that's propelling the growth for femtech. There will be increase in funding post-COVID in health tech in general, and relaxation to regulations, as I mentioned before. I would believe that traditional players would start investing and move into digital solutions, such as whether digital players and the service delivery, such as clinics and hospitals, or pharma or medtech companies investing more and more into digital solutions or consolidating with existing solutions. And the emergence of new trends, such as the medical kiosks in pharmacies. So we've already seen a little bit of that, but I think this is going to be more common. So you would go to a pharmacy, you can have a consultation there and a medical kiosk and get the medication that you need. As well as, the AR and VR that has been mentioned before. I would envision this to mostly be in the areas of mental health, cognitive behavioral therapy, pain, and rehab. And we've seen a few startups in this area, but I think this will be more and more emerging.
Interesting. Lots of different scope there. Tom, same question to you. What do you think are the trends that we should look out for?
Sorry, Kate, I just dropped off there.
It's okay. It happens.
Yeah. Trends. Yeah, I don't know. I refer you to my previous answer, really, which is I think that anyone that can really make something that replicates a genuine human interaction will be onto a winner, because a lot of the technology stuff is very utilitarian, and that works sometimes, right? When you need a tool. But I think particularly when it comes to mental health and other softer things like the family, like the places that the spaces that I work in, something with emotion and personality and a softer kind of side is needed.
I wonder, Tom, if you think, because one of my fears with anything that we've needed sort of to digitally shake up the healthcare sector for many years, and it was the same with education. And what happened because I've been reviewing apps for BBC Click for donkey's years, and what happened was that everybody suddenly realised there was this huge need for educational content in the digital space, and so there was an explosion and no quality control, reduced regulations, which meant that people who weren't perhaps as careful as other people were trying to get into the market just because they saw a financial opportunity. Yeah. Do you think there's a danger of us sort of knee-jerking ourselves into a whole load of mess, Tom, if we're not careful, though?
Maybe. I mean, the example that I can think of, talking of like EdTech, because everyone's, my kids are being educated at home right now, as the world's are, and like the tools that my daughter uses, she's 13, they've got the whole school running on Microsoft Teams, and like it's amazing. Like that isn't where technology is actually teaching them. That's like allowing great teachers to facilitate classes like they would in the real world through technology. So that's sort of where I'm going, which is like the technology is the enabler for the human to do the right thing, rather than the technology being the thing itself. If you know what I mean.
Good point. Dominic, same question to you. I saw this brilliant, I don't even know if it was a meme or real, but cancer detecting toilet bowl. Like, there were sensors in your toilet bowl that would actually, sort of take the sample of your urine as it was coming out of you and whatever, do the calculations. That's kind of like fantastical side of things. But what else in the terms of the remote diagnosis and assistance might be coming?
Yeah, well, in terms of remote diagnosis, I mean, there's also things, I mean, these were in development anyway, things like breath. I mean, there's a company near Cambridge called Alstone, and they're working on, in fact, cancer diagnosis as well, simply from the breath. And I did see a sort of chart of the number of diseases which are related to basic chemicals in the breath, and it is absolutely huge. Huge number could be diagnosed that way. So I think the real trend, which is sort of was happening anyway, but is really trying to get in early, not just with cancer, but with other things, to sort of see what the diagnosis is, see what the prognosis is. And that really links to the personalization of medicine. So, once you know exactly what you got, not just say cancer, but within the cancer, exactly what that is, you'll be able to give the right drug, the right treatment, the right cell therapy at the right time, for instance. So that personalization is really happening in a big way now, driven by science and also driven by, whether it's a toilet bowl or blood tests or breath tests. It won't be just diagnosis of one disease at a time. You'll be able to look at maybe several hundred in the same sample. So.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. Anna, okay, somebody's sitting at home watching this thinking, I think I might like to set up a health tech business. What advice would you give them?
Right. Well, I mean, there's so many different areas of it, but, it's kind of following the topic around data privacy, and I think also AI hasn't come up and so on. I think that is it requires that we innovate really with the right values in mind. I do think that, what we have looming is an absolute mental health pandemic. I think we had a crisis already, and with the pandemic that's just exacerbated. So we do need, and I would definitely encourage anyone, but you have to, this is thinking ahead. You have to have a data plan. You have to know the ethics you want to apply and what could possibly happen with that data in the future, and where that sector and our abilities to do amazing things in technology is accelerating at a really fast rate. And there are some initiatives around the ethics around it. And when it comes to health, that's obviously extremely important. I've also ran a corporate well-being tech company in the past, and I had to really educate also some people that wanted to use our platform that if you wanted to create employee well-being and engagement, you can't police them. Then people are going to feel more stressed and less, connected with the company. So I find that really, really important to start and engineer with ethics and value and what could possibly happen with the data in the future. And I mean, even the recent deal with Palantir and NHS is questionable. So those are areas. And then also look at the new paradigm of health. I mean, that's really where we are working. So the vagus nerve being absolutely central to how we respond to stress, is the nerve that regulates the stress response. And we're pioneering in a field. So I think there's also so much science that is coming out now as well, and a lot of new areas and new ways of thinking about things, new ways of solving, and much more focus on the whole part of a human, where we cannot isolate stress and how we respond to stress with the impact that is directly having on our bodies.
And when it comes to corporate welfare, programs, I think the key thing for people to remember is you've got to have to ask the right questions. And if you ask the right questions, you're going to hear some answers which are awkward for you to deal with. And it doesn't mean you don't have to deal with them, right? Okay, before we go into the final kind of like roundup thoughts, I've got one more question for Dominic, and that is around funding. what are the challenges at the moment in terms of getting funding, but also maybe if anyone's thinking of investing?
Yeah, I think it has been challenging. I mean, funding, you know, whether it's angel funding and seed stage, and obviously you talked about this, about your experience, and also IPOs, they tend to have quite long periods of time, you know, from the time you start talking to investors to the time you actually get funding in. So there's been some amazing listed companies, IPOs, in the last few months, you know, biotech and things that have had huge amounts of funding. They've been oversubscribed. But those were conversations really that had, you know, been going on for 6 months, 8 months, a year, this sort of thing. And certainly with angel funding, I think out of the 17 investments I've made, I've probably met the teams for at least 15 of those. So, you know, assessing the people, how the teams work, the chemistry, everything else is really critical. I don't think I'd be comfortable, and a lot of investors wouldn't, you know, making a significant investment without actually being able to meet people. So I think it has slowed it down a bit, but it's slightly difficult to tell, because if lockdown, you know, hopefully it won't, but if there's a second wave and lockdown happens again in the autumn, there could be more impact in terms of funding, because, you know, the funding that's happening now, you know, those conversations probably started 6 months ago, if not longer. So,
So what, maybe there'll be some positive impact because conversations start now, might be able to come to fruition around a second lockdown?
I think it's probably affected it less than it perhaps could have done. But I think if lockdown if lockdown continues or happens again, there could be more detrimental impact in terms of, you know, investors simply not being able to meet the teams. And so, when it comes to significant funding, that is. So.
Well, we are officially out of time, but I'm going to break the rules and just extend our time a wee bit longer, because I would like you all to end on just a final thought. If you could keep it relatively brief. If there was one thing that you would like our audience to take away from the session today, or any advice for a health tech startup, what would it be? And again, because I'm a creature of habit, Harjeet, you're first.
Okay, thanks so much. So, you know, quickly, just in terms of, I wanted to leave a thought in people's minds. I think if you could look at this, businesses are going to be implementing a 5D strategy, D for Denmark. I think all the D stand for diversification. There's going to be diversification of products and services offered, diversification of routes to market, diversification of customer base, diversification of supplier base, and diverse facilities, or, you know, most people call it remote working strategy. If you can provide a technology-based solution that meets one of those 5 Ds, I think you will be very successful, because that's exactly what organizations, big or small, irrespective of where they are, they're working on these strategies right now. Just like Dominic said, the second lockdowns are not that far away. The next pandemic is not that far away. Those decisions are being made right now. And so if you're in the business to help people diversify, that's where I think the opportunity is.
Is that basically your shopping list of things that you want to hear about?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, if you want to stay in business, the only way you can continue to be in business is to diversify many of the things that we have unfortunately concentrated due to cost considerations. So it's going to go the other way. And if you can play a role in that, there is money to be made.
There's a hot tip for you. Hanine, how about you? Final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I this is a very interesting point that Harjeet mentioned. I would want to echo this, and I would want to add to it the ability to scale in an efficient manner. So I think this is very important, to be able to scale in an efficient manner and implement scalability. I think this is one of the biggest challenges for startups that's gonna be coming up. So yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Dominic.
I think what the COVID has emphasized, I mean, health tech and, you know, drug development, everything has been huge over the last 5-10 years, driven by science, both in digital laboratory science in drug development. So that is continuing and accelerating. I think what it has emphasized the last few months is the absolute importance which has been made here of data. So even if you're in drugs, you know, the data that goes with it. And some of the companies that I've worked with who are in drugs and therapeutics, they've been able to carry on some work by crunching numbers at home, basically, without having to be in the laboratory, at least in the short term. So, and I think that will continue.
Brilliant tips. Anna, from you?
Yeah, I was just thinking, I want to circle in on one event that could potentially create or very rapidly grow the market and create a lot of new opportunities in that field that has been growing quite slowly. And that's the United Nations Global Policy Recommendation that came out quite recently. And I read it through, and a lot of it is quite general, but there is one point which could have massive impact, and that is that mental health care must be included in healthcare benefit packages and insurance schemes. And that essential mental health needs to be covered. And that would, especially for the US market, but in many other places, make an enormous difference in terms of how quick that would just explode the market. And that's the United Nations. And we know that sometimes when they come up with things, it's actually the one of the things that sort of has shifts something that has been brewing already for some time. So that's something I think to look at, and we might see a very rapid growth there. I think also what Harjeet mentioned, I totally agree with. I mean, I've been in that industry for a long time as well, and it's been quite slow growth in corporate well-being markets, and now we see some real action. And just on a sort of advice business in startups in this field as well. It's because we're talking about different markets, which very much Dominic outlined, and so it's important to understand your go-to-market strategy. And so selling into a healthcare system or selling through insurers or selling through corporate or direct to consumer are completely different. So to understand what that looks like, that will need a different strategy, that will need a different funding strategy, etc. I think that is something that is very important, because sometimes, you start with a great idea and then you try to sell it everywhere. And I see many early stage companies failing because they lack to identify how they're going to go to market with a strategy, with a product.
Great advice. And last word to you, Tom.
Oh, thank you, Kate. Yeah, I think this sector needs more startups, right? The world needs more startups, particularly health tech. And my advice would be start a company. Speaking as a sole founder, I wouldn't do it on your own. Try and do it with a great team. It's just twice as much fun and half as scary with another person or another couple of people that can, bring different skills to the table alongside yourself, and get the right advisors and partners on board. Startups, we need you. That's my final word.
Wonderful. A perfect way to end. Well, we have reached the end of our time, a bit like an old mercury thermometer. And so the conversation, though, really has only just started, I think. So please, keep your thoughts and comments coming in through social media. Make sure that you tweet about us. If you've got any thoughts, comments, and don't forget to use that event hashtag as well, so we can keep supporting and learning from each other as we continue to shape the post-COVID-19 world. My thanks to my wonderful panel, to Hanine, Tom, Harjeet, Dominic and Anna, and thanks to you for being here. I treasure you all and look forward to hearing and seeing what comes next. Stay healthy, stay safe, and keep looking out for each other. We'll see you another time. Enjoy the rest of your conference. That's me done for the day now, people. I think I'm going to get a glass of bubbles and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Cheers, everybody. Bye. Have a good one.